Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for students of counselling and psychotherapy. Here are your hosts, Rory Lees-Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hi, I'm Rory, and with me, as always, is Ken. How are you doing, Ken?
I am exceptionally well, Rory. Delighted to be here. You have tuned in and are listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, and this is episode 112. And what a show we have planned for you today. We're going to be starting off by speaking about meeting a client for the first time. You've got a new client presenting for therapy. What do you say? What do you do? Do you shake their hand? Meeting a client for the first time. We then move from that into Practice Matters, where Rory, you're going to be speaking about a subject that nobody wants to look at or think about, and that is what happens when a client dies.
Yes, I'm going to be talking about those very, very sad occasions when, you get a phone call or maybe someone says to you, I'm afraid that, we've heard information that your client's died, and what the procedure may be, and also other avenues that you may have to investigate and walk down in terms of things like the coroner's court and making statements. So I'm just going to give an overview of that. So as I always say, we hope for the best, but we do plan for the worst.
Yeah, not a happy topic but these are the kind of topics that so often we're faced with them only when this happens. And Counselling Tutor is about bringing up the topics that we should be thinking about in advance and planning for that, as you say, Rory. And then we're going to be ending episode 112 with becoming more employable as a counsellor. So that is really lightening things up. That's a positive note to end our program on, becoming more employable as a counsellor. There's lots you can do there, and we're going to be talking about that. But kicking us off, we're going to be speaking about meeting a client for the very first time, Rory.
Yes. What is the etiquette? How does that work? And there's a few things that I've noticed through the years. The first one is that if you're getting a client through a referral, you may have what I would call their Sunday name, which is their school name, the name the headmistress or headmaster may use. So do you say is it Kenneth or is it Ken? How do you like to be addressed? And the reason for that is that for some people, their full name, it's a bit like being talked to by a headmaster or a headmistress. So first of all is find out how they like to be addressed. In fact, I've had clients who've had a name written on the referral and they wanted to be addressed with a different name, which is fair enough. And also, do you shake hands? What do you do? And my view is that if a client wants to shake hands with me, that's fine. I don't offer to shake hands with a client. I just say, hello, welcome. My name's Rory, and we go through to the therapy room. But sometimes, certainly in British culture, some clients, and I have to say mainly male, like to shake your hand, Ken.
100%. And you can take the lead from the client. If the client wishes to shake the hand, which is a common greeting, as you say, Rory's, particularly in the West, then their hand will start rising up. And as you see that, of course, you respond to the client's frame of reference, and you will take your hand to meet theirs, to warmly shake it and welcome them in. And when I think about this meeting a client for the first time, I think about my first client contact. So going into placement and meeting that client for the first time. And I think about how nervous I was and how contemplative I was of who this person is and how they may present in our therapy room. And what we need to keep in mind is it can potentially be like that for each and every client that arrives with us from their frame of reference. They may be nervous. They may not know what to expect. They may even be a little bit scared coming in. They may have a lot of emotions bottled up. So we are, I guess, are there to warmly welcome them, maybe with a smile, but not too joyous in the body language, but showing that we are compassionate, that we are warm. The tone of our voice is important in speaking softly, welcoming them in, asking them maybe if the room is comfortable for them, maybe offering them a choice of where they choose to sit. If you have that luxury within your practice, where would you like to sit? And I've even found that offering a drink can be a little bit of an ice, but can I get you something to drink? Is there anything you prefer? We do have tea, coffee, we've got some water. I know there are certain agencies where you may not serve hot drinks because of health and safety, but in private practice, I guess I have the luxury to do that. But that little ice breaking before going into the formality of the contract can set a person at ease. And of course, it's all about that person eventually being themselves, and you can only be yourself when you are at ease.
Absolutely. And I think that, if you appear, when people go for meetings, if you meet, say, the bank manager or, professionals, they usually tend to offer their hand and shake your hand. And, I think the initial meeting really sets the tone of what the relationship will be. And I'm conscious that when I meet my clients, I'm a therapist, not a bank manager or an accountant. So you have to be thoughtful of that. And that, you're absolutely right, Ken. Putting the client at ease, appearing as yourself, because you're good enough as a therapist. You feel that yourself is okay, and generally setting the tone. And it's just so important, because that is the opening curtain of the kind of play of therapy, if you like. If you think of going to a play, there's an opening curtain, and the players, the actors, come onto the stage and start the play. And it's a bit like that in therapy. The initial meeting, certainly with a new client, really does set the tone. I've had the odd fist bump before now, where someone's done a fist bump. I've had a kind of like a gladiator handshake where you lock thumbs together. For some people, I've not had a high five yet, but if a client wanted to do that, and that was culturally the way they communicated, I wouldn't be, I'd work with them. I'd work with what they wanted. But yeah, really, really important. And then at the end of the session, of course, sometimes the client might want to shake your hand. Hugging, of course, comes up at the end of the session. If a client offers a hug, and my view of that is, I don't offer to hug people, but if someone wants a hug, I just give them a hug if that's what they want, that really is, I think, working just behind the client. So important, not pushing yourself onto the client, but just working, following them, following their lead, giving them autonomy.
I like that, and you've hit the nail on the head there, Rory. It's about standing behind the client or being behind them. I love how you phrased that. I could actually see it happening. It's not for us to lead. It's not for us to bring our strong personality, to be in charge, to be the expert. We want to be dissipating that and just working on comfort levels for the client, almost taking a subservient role, but of course holding the boundaries that we need to hold, not being too strong. And mirroring. And you say, Rory, that if a high five did come up, you might be tempted to go in there. You're not going to leave someone hanging with their hand in the air. Never happened to me either. And I guess it may be unlikely in counselling. Well, it has been in my experience so far. But if it did come up, I think, yeah, my hand would go up to me. That's mirroring the client. And you can take mirroring further in terms of how is the tone of voice that your client presents in. Are they softly spoken? Are they loudly spoken? And kind of mirror that back. And don't emulate them, but just mirror how they are, their way of being. And there's a lot of research that suggests that if you mirror the way they sit, the way they hold their arms, the way they cross their legs, that it can go some way into creating some kind of a bond. And I have to say, and I have to put this in, this is really important, that this comes from sales training, not counselling training. But I guess there must be something in that, just kind of mirroring that person, letting them be who they are, putting them at ease. And so often when we as human beings, that the human condition is that when we are in a nervous state, when we're frightened, when we are unsure, that can leak out in certain ways, and we can appear not as we are when we're at peace. So you may see little mannerisms that the client may even say, oh, I'm really nervous about this. They may be wringing their hands, and you can acknowledge and be there with them in that. So if a client says, oh, I'm so nervous, rather than throwing the big ring of rescue, you can say, what is it that you're nervous about? And let them start leading from the very beginning.
Absolutely. And also a quick word about leakage. It's not a very respectful word, but it is very accurate for when you first meet a client and you're walking towards the therapy room and they're telling you all their problems and they're sharing. It does happen when people have got so much of a burden that they literally can't hang on long enough to sit down in front of you. They just want to tell you. And that has to be very respectfully worked with. And, obviously you can't tell people to shut up. That would be totally unacceptable. But I think that's in your responses. You can't start a counselling session in the lobby of your agency or, outside your house, if you're meeting someone outside your house, if you're a private practitioner. So the way I work with that is just let them be. And then when you get them into when they're in the therapy room, just politely say, I hear you. There's a lot that you need to say here, but if you could just give me a second, if you just bracket that, we need to do a contract. And once the contract's done, then, they speak as they want, but the contract has to be in place. But, I think it's sometimes something that gets forgotten. The contract gives the client more autonomy because they know the limits of confidentiality. So working with that leakage, it's, as I say, not a respectful word, but it is one that, if it ever happens to you, is very, very accurate. It's a very accurate word. The client sharing information before you've actually sat down with them.
Definitely. Specifically, any therapeutic information the client needs to be protected by the boundaries of that contract. That's what it is there for. So I firmly agree with that, 100%. And there's another side to the contracting. It can be, and I bring this because of working with as a supervisor with supervisees and with my own learners when training counsellors, there can be solace in the contracting for specifically beginner counsellors, where I was really nervous when the client first arrived, and I was so glad that I had the contracting so that I, the counsellor, could kind of find my pace and come to ease. And what we need to consider is that when we're doing the contracting, maybe that's something that we've practiced, something that we are familiar with, something that we are more comfortable with. That does not necessarily mean that once we are feeling more comfortable, that the client might be feeling more comfortable. We need to be looking to them all the time. The contracting can seem invasive. It's the time of the counselling where we're being directive and telling them what's going to be. So within the contracting, be soft and check with the client continuously where they are at with that. So rather than reading a list of what could be perceived as rules, you might check that out with them, check what their understanding is. If you speak about where you may break confidentiality, ask them how they feel about that, and get them as part of the conversation as early as possible to set them at ease, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And this comment, this topic, if you like, came up in our Facebook group. And if you don't know where our Facebook group is, if you go to Facebook, type in Counselling Tutor, 2 L's, because it's the UK spelling, and we're a closed group. Knock on the door, we let you in. Of course we let you in. And you can join 24,000 maybe people who are interested in the world of counselling and psychotherapy. There are tutors, there are supervisors, there are people who lecture. Ken and myself sometimes pop in, and in there people ask just the best of questions that we draw occasionally, more than occasionally, for podcast topics.
100%. And what a great topic this was, that meeting the client for the very first time. We'd love to hear your thoughts on that. So if you are in our Facebook group, please, let's get that conversation going. If you're not a member, as Rory said, join us, get into that Facebook group. So we're moving away from that first meeting onto practice matters and that very sobering topic, Rory, when a client dies.
Yeah, so I'm just going to be covering professional kind of competency here, what you may be called to do, what you should have in place, and how to support yourself. Those are the 3 things that you need to consider, and you need to really have in place now. You need to have that structure in place. So if something, the worst case scenario happened, you would absolutely know what to do. It sounds a bit robotic and a bit sort of military operation, but once this happens, there are outside agencies that will contact you, maybe want a statement, and if you're forewarned, then it'll make the process in a very difficult time a little easier.
That's Practice Matters with Rory after this very short message about our paid-for subscription part of Counselling Study Resource called Counselling Study Resource. Take the stress out of your counselling studies and get the support of Rory and I by joining us in the Counselling Study Resource. See how Counselling Study Resource can help you
visit counsellingtutor.com. That's counsellingtutor.com.
Discovering a client has died can be one of the most traumatic events in a counsellor's professional life. Depending on the circumstances, the coroner's office may be informed and an investigation carried out. Coroners are independent judicial officers who investigate deaths reported to them. They will make whatever inquiries are necessary to find out the cause of death, and this includes ordering a post-mortem examination, obtaining witness statements and medical records, or holding an inquest. And this happens when the cause of death is unknown, death was violent or unnatural, death was sudden or unexplained, a person who died was not visited by a medical practitioner during their final illness, a medical certificate was not available, person who died had not been seen by the doctor who signed the medical certificate within 14 days before or after they died. Death occurred during an operation or before a person came out of an anaesthetic, or the medical certificate suggests that death may have been caused by an industrial disease or industrial poisoning. Now, part of the investigation is to acquire evidence that can be analysed to form a conclusion to how the death occurred. And in the UK, this is sometimes referred to as a short form verdict, which can be of natural causes, accidental death, misadventure, suicide, neglect, unlawful killing, or an open verdict. This is sometimes happens when there's not enough evidence to return a verdict, but this is rare and it's really only used in the last resort. Coroners can also use something called a narrative verdict, where they outline the circumstances of the death in a detailed way based on the evidence the coroner's heard. This can be helpful for relatives of the deceased, as it is more a detailed conclusion of the events leading up to the person's death. In cases where death was in, say, police custody, a prison, or a large event such as a football match, the coroner may conclude it's in the public interest to have the case heard in front of a jury. At the end of the case, the coroner will provide the jury with a choice of conclusions to deliberate on. So what happens is that the coroner will help the jury to look at a number of possibilities given the evidence. Sometimes there has been cases where there's only one, having heard the evidence, there's only one outcome, and the jury have to go away and have a think about it, and then they deliver just one outcome. But usually the coroner would put maybe two outcomes. In case of suicide, it could be death by misadventure. So if someone's overdosed on drugs, without, if there's no suicide note, it could be seen as either suicide or death by misadventure. Someone's just not taken a different form of drug and it's killed them. So the jury, having heard the evidence, would have to come out and make a decision on that. And it would be the same with the coroner. Burden of proof, unlike a criminal court where the outcome is judged on being beyond reasonable doubt, a coroner's court works in the same way as a civil court does, which is a balance of probabilities. In other words, the burden of proof is less in a coroner's court than in a criminal court. The coroner makes a finding of facts and cannot attribute criminal or civil liability. At the end of the proceedings, a summary of where a person has died and how they died is delivered, and it's described as a finding of facts or the verdict. In some cases where the coroner is of the opinion that death could have been prevented, the coroner can make a recommendation for change under something called Coroner's Rule 43 to the person or organisation involved. An example of that's a hospital trust that may have to renew its policies to protect other patients. Now, from a counsellor's perspective, it's possible that someone from the coroner's office may get in contact with you and ask for your notes and attendance. If the therapist refusing cited confidentiality, then the coroner may issue a subpoena, which is a court order. Now, failure to comply may result in contempt of court, which could result in a custodial sentence. So the message there is that if your notes and you are subpoenaed to turn up, then you're under a legal obligation, and if you don't, then you have to face the consequences. it's good practice before sending or responding to any requests. Speak with your insurance company. They may be able to advise you on the process of what may be asked of you. So one of the things about having an insurance company, and it is an ethical imperative, it's in a lot of codes of ethics that we will have insurance to cover our work, is that they have a helpline, and you can speak to the helpline, and they have specifically trained people who can give you help, observation, support, and will may be able to guide you and support you if you have to actually attend court. I would always say speak with your supervisor to gain support, share your thoughts and feelings and any apprehensions you may have. And also it may be that there's things that you want to say about the client. Maybe you need to go through that process. It may also be something that you may want to process in personal therapy. It's also worth speaking to your ethical body to gain a sense of what options are available to you.
Thank you as always, Rory. This is something we need to consider. And, you hope that it may not happen to you, but it does happen. It certainly happened to me. And I know when it did, I was running around and consulting with peers. But I'm glad to say that I had already looked at this because I trained under Rory, and it was something that we covered in our training. So I was very grateful for that. And I'm very grateful that you brought this topic today, Rory. And of course, if you want Rory's super duper handout, it is free. You can grab it right now. How do you get it? Well, you just go to our mother website, which is counsellingtutor.com, 2 L's in the word counselling, counsellingtutor.com. Click on the podcast tab. It's at the top of the page. Make your way to episode 112. That's 112. That's this episode. On that page, you'll find all the show notes of everything we've discussed together, as well as any links to external resources that will kind of further support what we're discussing today. And you can download Rory's super duper handout on what to do when a client dies from within that page, just by putting in your name and your email, and we will send it to you free of charge. And of course, if you are already a member of the Counselling Study Resource, which is our paid for part of Counselling Tutor, all the resources have already been uploaded for you, and they are in the handouts vault. So for our members, just log into your CSR and it's there for you. And as always, we value your membership with us. Now, moving on. We're looking at becoming more employable. Now, Rory, there's not a week that goes by that I don't see this topic in our Facebook group with people saying, is there really any work out there for counsellors? How much do you get paid? I spent so much time studying and a lot of money studying. Am I going to win that back or get that back? I guess you don't win it back. Am I going to get a return for my investment? And I guess none of us come into counselling to become multimillionaires. However, we are entitled to make a living from what we do. But are there any jobs? And if there are, how do we make ourselves more employable, Rory?
Well, it's interesting. I keep in contact with a number of my students that I've taught through the years, and a lot of them are in paid work, and they're in paid work in counselling. And I think part of the reason for that is that when I taught, I told them the hard truths of how to gain employment. And I think one of those is to not talk yourself out. Many years ago, I taught a group of students not related to counselling, and they were all having a good moan about, there's no jobs, I'll never get any work, And I said to them, I love when you say that. And they kind of looked at me a bit nonplussed. And I said, because you've taught yourself out of success. And it means that I'll never have to worry about competing with you against a job interview because you'll never be there. So the first thing is to have a mindset of there is work out there. Yes, let's be realistic. There's not pages and pages and pages and pages of job adverts for counsellors, but there is work, and I'll acknowledge it is regional. Obviously, the nearer to bigger cities you are, the more chance there's going to be more people employing anybody, and that includes counsellors. But there are a few things you can do to make yourself more employable. Certainly things like having maths and English. If you haven't got a level 2 maths and English, there's loads of places that you can go and just do quick training. I did it in my teacher training. I didn't along with a number of other qualifications that I didn't have when I started back in education in my 40s. I just went and did a very quick level 2 test. I didn't even go to the lessons. All I did was just turn up at the college, and they put me through it. And if you're at college, what I'd suggest is make inquiries, see if they'll put you through the level 2 English and the maths, because they're not difficult. And I speak as someone who's dyslexic and I've dyscalculus. I suspect I have. And I passed. And of course, those are really useful qualifications. But here's the key thing. I think a lot of people are employing counsellors, certainly independent agencies, are looking less at the qualifications and more at the person, more at their experience of working with things like trauma, a good understanding of equality and diversity, really wanting to help clients, really wanting to be part of that agency. And, I've got a colleague who's just got a fabulous job working for a charity, and she just loves the work. She's being paid a really reasonable salary for it. So I would say, think about when you're looking for jobs, thinking about if it fits for you, if this is something you're passionate about, because people who employ counsellors want people committed to the work. They just don't want people turning up for a job, I'm afraid. Ken?
100%. And this topic, as I say, comes up so often. So we've revisited so often, and I've really done some deep thinking on it. And as counsellors, the skills that we learn are to counsel. So when we're in that room, we have that client in front of us, there is something that takes place. But finding a job, getting past an interview is a whole different set of skills. Now, you said, Rory, that there are jobs out there, but usually they can be quite highly subscribed. A lot of people going for the same job. Well, the realism is it's like that in most sectors. It really is. There's a lot of skilled people looking for the same job. And then if you take the time to have a think through the eyes of the agency that is posting the job, what would they most likely be looking for? And have a look at yourself. Do I have the skill set to match that? And it's about how you present yourself in that agency. So an example, this is just taking an example at random. Let's say you were going for an interview at an agency that worked with trauma. Rory, as you've just mentioned, you mentioned the topic of trauma. If you were to go into that interview and you had done some training or some CPD on trauma, you'd done in-depth research on who they are as an organization, what is on their website, what is their mission statement, what do they believe in, who is their board, and you can speak about them. You can speak about their business. You can speak about what they work with. And be honest, you may say, I've done some continuing professional development on trauma-informed practice prior to coming in here, but I would be interested in broadening that in working with you. But understand who it is that you're meeting with. Understand who they are and what boxes they need to tick, and see if that fits and matches with you, and speak about them, not just yourself.
Yes, absolutely. And also, you may very well get a question of why you want to work with this client group. When I was a support worker, and I did 5 years as a support worker, and I was a support worker, and I taught in the evenings, and I counselled at the weekends, and I was very busy. And one of the things they asked me is, why do you want to work with this client group? I work with ex-offenders. And they asked why, and they asked some very probing questions. And the answers to those questions got me the job, because it clearly came over that I wasn't just interested in getting a job that paid the wages. I was interested in the client group. So be prepared for that question. Why do you want to work with this client group? What is your interest? Because I think that's a key. It really is a key question. And Ken's absolutely right. If you take evidence of continual professional development, it could be CPD certificates, it could be a log of things you've done, extracurricular things, things you've attended. Not everything gets a CPD certificate. If you've read books, or if you've seen programs, or you've visited an event, but keep a log, the evidence to show how committed and how invested, that's the word, invested you are in the work. I think that stands head and shoulders sometimes above just raw qualifications.
Definitely, without a doubt. And of course, counselling tutor, we have always seen that as being so important. In fact, we have a paid for part of our service. It's called Counselling Study Resource, and we have over 60 hours of lectures on specialised topics in the Counselling Study Resource, all linked to CPD certificates. So if you're interested in checking out the CSR, then you can check that out at the end of this episode. There will be kind of a mention of where you can link to that. But there's one last thing that I'd like to put in from a frame of reference point of view. So you've mentioned it there, Rory, that think about what it is that they would be interested in. And generally at the end of a interview conversation, the person doing the interview will say to you, do you have any questions? They will say to you, the person being interviewed. The incorrect answer is, no, I think you've answered everything. That is the incorrect answer. What you want to make an impact in an interview is to hold something back. Make sure you've gone through their website and plan an informed question that you can ask them, that you can get more information and they can speak a little bit more about what they do. A good question at the end of an interview, when that question is open, do you have any further questions, is really good for just putting that extra dot and line below your name on the shortlist.
Yes, because any reputable and forward-thinking organisation is looking for an external view of their operation. You know, they're inviting you to say, so you've had a look at what we do. Tell us what you think, because that's an opportunity for them, and they should be doing this to think, oh, that's a good question. Have we ever, I've been on interview panels where an interviewee's done that, and there's been quite a few people looking at each other saying, I don't know the answer to that.
Ooh.
That's an area that we really need to look at. Thank you very much. And then you realise exactly what an asset you've got sat in front of you, because they're helping your business. And it's always, what can I do for you in the world of employment? It's always, what can I do for you? How can I help you? So, yeah. So, people want, generally speaking, in forward-thinking organisations, people want to employ someone who has got an eye on not only their ball, but also on the organisation's ball as well, if you like.
100%.
And, yeah. So just make sure that you have a good, and there's always things you can ask. That if you do your research, you'll find there's always things that you may observe about an organisation that you can feed back.
100%. I mean, just speak about them, speak about what they do. And of course, we're speaking now about becoming more employable as a counsellor, and that kind of lends itself to being more employable by an agency or a charity. But there's another side to this. You can become more employable by employing yourself and going into private practice. If you have the experience, that is the important part here, have the experience to go into private practice. And then the method to make yourself more employable is to do CPD, continuing professional development, on running a small business. Again, the actual counselling when you're sitting in front of the client, that is not running a private practice. That is client-facing counselling. That's what you will learn at your college, university. Running the business of practice is something completely different. And I have got a really happy surprise announcement for all of our members of the Counselling Study Resource, our paid-for part of Counselling Tutor. We have just added a going into private practice training module into our CSR. So if you are a Counselling Study Resource member and you want to see more of that, log into your Counselling Study Resource and you will find it there. It is under the practice-based lectures, and it is a whole course on going into private practice that will walk you through it step by step. If you're not a member of the Counselling Study Resource, you want to learn more about that, link will be at the end of this episode. There it was, episode 112, Rory.
Yeah, what a great episode. We started it off about how to greet the client, how you greet clients. We talked about professional kind of probity in working with clients or working with the situation if a client dies. And then we talked about how to become more employable. And of course, Ken's bombshell announcement of that new module for our CSR members. Fantastic. And hey, stay grounded and stay safe.
Take the stress out of your counselling studies and get the support of Rory and I by joining us in the Counselling Study Resource. Counselling Study Resource, or CSR for short, is the world's most comprehensive assignment guidance and study support resource for students just like you of counselling and psychotherapy. See how Counselling Study Resource can help you. Visit counsellingtutor.com. That's counsellingtutor.com.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode on our website at www.counsellingtutor.com.